This is Olympic wrestling champion Mark Schultz, New York Times bestselling author of the book Foxcatcher, and you are listening to On the Block Radio.
Surveys show that 95% of men and around 72% of women have masturbated in their life, but with rumors that it's unhealthy, can cause blindness, and even infertility, can masturbation be good for you? Feeling yourself isn't just for single people. 70% of men and 40% of women in relationships reported masturbating within the 4 weeks leading up to a recent survey. After all, it feels good. Not only is dopamine released, which helps control the brain's reward and pleasure centers, reducing feelings of stress, but other endorphins released during an orgasm can decrease your perception of pain. For women, polishing the pearl can reduce menstrual cramping. And of course, with the help of the hormone prolactin, which is linked to sleep, you're likely to feel exhausted and catch some much-needed Z's. Feel like you're coming down with the cold? One study found that in males, components of the immune system are activated during masturbation, increasing the number of white blood cells in the bloodstream. Solo sessions might also help men reduce cancer, with high ejaculation frequency correlating with a decreased risk of total prostate cancer. Though it's unclear why, researchers hypothesize that increased ejaculation means potential carcinogenic secretions in the prostate are excreted more regularly, decreasing their negative impact on the body. But why have humans and animals evolved to masturbate if it's seemingly a waste of energy or semen in men? Well, it turns out that self-love can actually improve the quality of sperm. A study showed that recent male masturbation reduced the number of sperm inseminated at the next copulation, but not the number retained by the female. From this, it was concluded that masturbation is a male strategy to improve the fitness of their sperm, as younger sperm have a higher likelihood of insemination. Not only that, but masturbation can improve your sexual performance. Both women and men have pelvic floor muscles that stretch from your pubic bone to your tailbone. As we age, these muscles weaken, causing sexual dysfunction in women and erectile dysfunction in men. But stroking the penis or clitoris can activate the bulbocavernosus reflex, resulting in pelvic floor muscles contracting. It's essentially a workout for your sex muscles. Nitric oxide levels also diminish with age and can contribute to a decreased sex drive, but masturbation can help maintain it in your blood throughout your life. But while masturbating does have physiological benefits, it's important to mix up your techniques. Using the same way to get off every time can make you sexually unresponsive to other types of stimulation. This could lead to decreased sexual arousal or performance when it comes time to do the deed with a real-life partner. So make sure you mix it up. At the end of the day, masturbation is a safe and healthy activity, so put on some music, light those candles, and have yourself a good night.
You've been listening to On the Block, a podcast for bonobos only. No chimps allowed.
I was going to ask you, there's a lot of these guys, and I know you've talked with Duncan about this, but and he's probably into guys like Kurzweil and these folks, right? The Singularity.
Yeah, sure.
That guy I was telling you that he's probably going to come on our show, on this show in a month. Ramez Nam, the guy from Microsoft who writes all those sci-fi books, and he's one of those futurists. I've had some interaction with Timothy Ferriss. Do you know Tim Ferriss?
I've never met him in person, but Neil Strauss is a good friend of his, and we have several mutual. In fact, when I got to Cassie and I spent a week at Andrew Weil's house a couple years ago up in BC, and when we showed up, Andy, the first night at dinner, I said, "So, you must have some interesting people come by up here," and he said, "Yeah, just last week." Tim Ferriss? And I was like, yeah. He said, yeah, he was staying in your room last week. And I was like, oh, that's cool. He wrote the 4-Hour Workweek, right? And he said, yeah. He said, that guy didn't stop working the whole time he was here.
No shit.
Yeah.
Hey, but I want to get back to the question about the book, but Neil Strauss, man, you guys are close, right? You guys are friends? I just heard him on Howard Stern a little while ago, talking about the upheaval in his life and what happened with the kind of sex addiction thing that he went through, and
the truth.
What's up with that? Yeah,
that's a really good book.
Yeah, I mean, it was riveting, his conversation about it. He was super honest and
Neil's
funny.
a special guy. I like Neil a lot, and I came into his life because he interviewed me when he was working on this book.
Okay.
And then we got to be friends. And I was, honestly, I turned down an interview. He asked me to be on his Sirius XM satellite radio show.
That's probably why he was on Stern, is he was in the building.
Well, he's known Stern a long time, I think.
Okay.
He used to be a music critic for Rolling Stone and New York Times.
That's right. So they go way back.
And he wrote a book about Motley Crue, I think, and then he wrote a book with Marilyn Manson.
Probably knows Chuck Klosterman then, if he's doing that.
Could be, yeah. I mean, and then he also wrote How to Make Love Like a Porn Star with Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, totally.
So he and Stern would have known each other in lots of ways.
But anyway, you were saying about him.
But yeah, I mean, I like a lot of people, I heard about him through The Game, which which is a book about how to pick up women by tricking them, basically.
Yeah.
And so I thought the guy's just a fucking creepy asshole. But then I got to know him, and I realized, well, that's not the guy I was expecting at all. And then I looked at The Game. I can't say I read it, but I sort of read through it, and I realized, like, okay, The Game is a story of a guy who can't get laid, whose whole life is built around trying to get access to women by hanging out with rock and roll bands, and he just can't make it work. And he finds that actually his editor told him, hey, there's this community of guys who are using scientifically demonstrated techniques and all this. And so he goes to do a writing project about them and ends up learning the techniques and becomes successful with women.
Wow.
So that's what the story is. But then at the end of the story, first of all, the guy who teaches him is ready to commit suicide. So he's certainly not whitewashing how happy these people are.
Like, this is awesome.
And he himself realizes, this is kind of bullshit. It enables me to walk up to a woman in a bar or a restaurant and say hello and start a conversation and hold her attention, which once you do that, then it's much easier to end up in bed with her at some point, right? But I still don't know what to do. And I'm not a better person than I used to be. So the book is really about self-exploration, So once I saw that, then it's like, okay, he's not the guy advocating this. He's just a guy telling his story.
He's not prescriptive. He's just telling. Descriptive. Yeah.
And it's an interesting story, and he's a really good writer.
Yeah.
And so the truth is basically okay, what happened to him next? He fell in love. He cheated on the woman he was in love with by sleeping with her best friend or something. Yeah. She dumped his sorry ass. And he had this sort of moment where he's like, well, what is my life? What am I doing? I've got money. I've got fame. I've got lots of famous friends. But I don't love anyone, and no one loves me. Yeah. And what the fuck is wrong with me?
Yeah, no shit.
And so he has this friend, Rick Rubin, who's a big producer.
Yeah, I know Rick. I mean, of Rick.
Yeah, so anyway, he's like neighbors.
I golf with Rick. Oh, no shit.
Yeah, so he hangs out, he surfs with Rick and everything. And Rick apparently is a really smart guy, and Rick's like, dude, look at the way you behave, look at the way you think, you need therapy, you need, So he goes... So the book, The Truth, is essentially based on the Odyssey. It's him going out and having his challenges and adventures, which are, going out and doing sex addiction therapy. Then he goes and decides maybe he's not a sex addict, so he's going to check out polyamory. And then he goes to swingers parties and conventions, and then he tries setting up a harem. So he goes through runs the gamut of all these different options.
Wow. And what does he come to? I mean,
he comes back to the woman he was in love with and marries her, and they have a baby now.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's how it ended.
It's a love story. Yeah. It's and I was with him in New York. He had his publisher fly me out to New York to do an event with him and Esther Perel at the Strand bookstore. Yeah. And and he said today, we were in the hotel talking, and he's like doing tons of interviews, Yeah. And he's like, I just don't know how to describe this book, man. I just don't know. I don't have the essence of it. And I said, dude, it's a love story. And he's like, fuck, That's it. You're right. It's a love story.
It's amazing. He's so close to it that he can't see it.
Yeah.
So back to your book.
Right.
For
which is not a love story.
Yeah. Well, in a sense. It's a love story with prehistory. So what are you saying to people? You're saying that civilization is, it's grinding to a halt, and you're saying that that's okay. We shouldn't keep.
Well, I'm not convinced it's grinding to a halt.
Oh, you think it's still trying to keep it? It's going to keep itself going. What do people need to do?
Yeah. Well, essentially, what I'm saying is that it's a fantasy to think we're going to go back. Nobody's going to go back, right? Yeah. We're not going to go back to being hunter-gatherers.
Right.
I think the line I use in the book is something like, we're not wolves. Mm-hmm. We're poodles. Mm-hmm. And who, descended from wolves.
Yeah.
But, if we find ourselves living in the wild, we're not going to revert to wolves. We're going to be feral poodles,
right,
which is a very different fucking beast,
yeah.
So
Frenchie.
Yeah. I'll shake my pom-poms at you. But anyway, so we're going to live in a zoo. Our descendants are going to live in zoos. They're going to be artificial environments. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
Especially if we've got 7 billion people on the planet, or 10, or whatever it's going to be, right? There's absolutely no way around that. But we're going to live in a zoo. Do we want it to be the zoo in fucking Calcutta, or do we want it to be the San Diego Zoo? Mm-hmm. And what is the difference between those zoos? The one zoo is designed for the convenience of the zoo. It's fucking cages. Get in the cage and shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
The other zoo is designed with attention to the natural environment of the animals that occupy the zoo. Oh. So what I'm advocating is that we take this knowledge and this understanding that I'm trying to clarify in this book and use it to design a world for ourselves and our descendants that more closely replicates the world that we are born from, the world that created us and shaped our appetites and our frustrations and all the things that make us the sort of animal we are. Create an artificial environment that replicates that world.
So it's like what Olmsted and those guys were trying to do by putting green spaces into cities and making sure that people had these.
It's what Montessori schools are trying to do, right? Yeah. It's what paleo restaurants are trying to do. It's what free range farming and there are a lot of people who are already working in these directions. Yeah. And what I'm trying to do in this book is say, people are so misinformed about what prehistory was like.
Yeah.
We didn't really finish that point. For people who don't understand, the thing about people living the natural lifespan of humans is that they include infant mortality when they calculate how long people lived. That gives you a false impression that people were old when they were 35. They weren't. No human being has ever been old in their 30s. Yeah. Not physically anyway. Right? But everybody thinks we've doubled the human lifespan. We haven't. So people like Kurzweil or, I respond to some of these
futurists that say, we're going to have nanotechnology that's going to cure disease, and we're going to, these Google cars that drive themselves, and you know what I mean. And
the problem is that that's another thing, like health, right? Yeah. Everybody says, well, health is much better now. We have antibiotics. What they don't understand is saying we have antibiotics, and that's why modernity is better than prehistory, is like saying, we have airbags.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, but there were no fucking cars in prehistory.
Yeah.
So there was
you were smashing into a pole going 60 in a big metal machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're congratulating yourself for solving a problem that didn't exist until you created it.
Right. Yeah.
That's like, you're going to expect me to thank you because you come and put out the fire you started in my basement.
Right. It's like saying we have blood pressure medication.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we didn't have high blood pressure.
We didn't have high blood pressure.
We walked around.
We didn't have tuberculosis. We didn't have diphtheria. We didn't have influenza. We didn't have all these diseases came from either domesticated animals that were living in close proximity to us after the advent of agriculture, or the disgusting shit-filled streets that we lived in once we started living in settlements as opposed to nomadic foragers, right? So we created the worst killers of humanity, and then several millennia later figured out how to have a flushing toilet.
Yeah.
And now we're congratulating ourselves for having fixed a problem several thousand years after we created
You
it.
bring up the flushing toilet. I've been trying to buy a product for the past several months, and my wife gets on my case about it. It's called the Squatty Potty.
Oh,
You know about
yeah.
these things?
So I've got two. I've got several of them.
She gets
yeah.
mad at me because she thinks nothing named this can be a serious item, and I keep showing her all the data that we shit wrong. With the toilet is actually causing all kinds of intestinal problems too, because we don't have full elimination, and people have hemorrhoids, and people have all kinds of bowel issues, impacted things, and because we don't. And when Westerners, and myself included, travel around the world, you talk about being poodles instead of wolves. And then you go to a place that has a toilet where you have to squat over it, and Americans freak out, and we think we're in we're not in civilization anymore, right? Because they don't even have a proper toilet. But what's funny is that's way better for your health.
Way better.
You squat over.
And the other and also they don't have toilet paper like in Indonesia or India. They have water, right? You wipe your ass with your left hand. You clean your fingers in a hose or a faucet or something. Americans freak out about that.
Yeah.
But, one of those people comes here and they're like, let me get this straight. So you go to a barbecue, you got barbecue sauce all over your hands, and you're going to give me a dry paper towel to clean my hands, and that's it? And you're gonna feel clean walking away from that barbecue?
Yeah, exactly.
What is wrong with you people?
And also, a lot of doctors say taking paper and rubbing it on your sphincter is a really bad idea, because it's it's wood. Yeah. You're rubbing
and it's
grains
bleached.
of wood.
Yeah. So,
well, I bleach my asshole too. So it's
that's obvious.
that's obvious.
Do a bleach bath. Do you? Yeah, it's a strange thing. So, that little conversation right there sort of replicates the book, right? It's like, oh, you think it's better? Wait, look at the other way.
Right.
And let me show you objectively how what you think is better is actually worse. So I talk about Columbus and the first contact with the Arawaks in Hispaniola, right?
Yeah.
And
how well that went for them.
Yeah, and his letter that he sent back to the Queen, all about how these people are amazing and they're so kind and generous. If you express admiration for anything, they just hand it to you. And there's food everywhere, and they're beautiful, and they're happy. And it's like, with 50 men, I can enslave the whole race.
Yeah.
So who's civilized here?
Yeah.
Right?
That's such a good letter to point this out.
Yeah. And of course, that's from Howard Zinn, A People's History of the USA.
And then, by the way, within 10 years, the population of that island went from 1.2 million to about 1,200 people.
Yeah.
I mean, they massacred everybody.
Right. Immediately.
They invented sex trafficking in the Western world. They would take these 10-year-old girls and take them as sex slaves and take them back.
Right. And when they were done with them, throw them off the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're the civilized.
These are the good Christians.
They're bringing civilization. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the thing. And the trick is, and I don't know if it'll be successful, but the trick is to try to. This is really disturbing news for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of emotional resistance to hearing that you're the Nazis.
Yeah.
Your people are the Nazis. People don't want to hear that, and so I don't know whether this book will be successful or not. But it's something where I can't dance around the truth.
Right.
It is what it is. And in order to understand, that's why I want to use the subtitle from Louis C.K., Why Everything's Amazing But Nobody's Happy. Because the what I feel emotionally is what I want to say to people, and it's the same thing I said to people in Sex at Dawn, is the fact that you're not happy doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Right? In Sex at Dawn, it was like the fact that you're tired of having sex with your husband after 15 years doesn't mean there's something wrong with your husband.
Wife, there's something,
doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Doesn't mean you have a bad marriage.
And you might not have to get divorced just on that fact if you can talk about it and think about it.
It's completely natural that you feel that way.
Yeah.
But in order to understand that, you need to understand what kind of animal you are. You need to understand you are an animal.
Yeah.
You evolved with certain proclivities. And when you put that animal in this position, it's completely normal that you're going to have those reactions, right? So people felt liberated by Sex at Dawn. And I want to try to trigger that same response in this book where it's like, look, of course you're not happy. You're told you're lucky, but you're not lucky.
Right.
You're told you live in the best time ever. That's objectively
worlds.
not true.
Yeah.
You're told that these, having a new car and a new watch and a new this and a new that is going to make you happy, and you're confused that it doesn't. I'm telling you, it never will. It never could.
Never was supposed
You've
to,
been conned. This whole thing's a fucking con, right? So it's deeply political and subversive, and there's a lot of anger in it.
Yeah.
But I hope at least some people will feel some sense of liberation when they read it.
We just had an event at the school, a 2-day event on literature and social justice, and we brought a few people there. One of them was a group, 2 women, who co-edited a book called Octavia's Brood, which is about the science fiction author Octavia Butler. It's not really about her. It uses her as a template, and then they have stories that have been submitted. It's an anthology by various people who are activists, but are also authors, and they write horror and speculative fiction and sci-fi, and all of them have a kind of social justice theme to them of some kind, you know what I mean? And one of the essays in the book was written by Mumia Abu-Jamal. Do you know Mumia? And he, what he wrote about is Star Wars, and he said this was such an amazing piece of propaganda for the American public in the 1970s, because what everybody did was they watched these movies and became obsessed with them and identified with the rebels. You know what I mean? Everyone loved Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, right? And we all identified with these characters, right? Americans, right? And he said this was on purpose because this was helping ease the growing reality that we're the empire, right? We have more in common, especially post-Vietnam, but even well before that. To take it to the scope of your book, for the past 6,000 years, we're not the rebels, we're the empire.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy pill to swallow. That's not an easy thing to say to people. And what I like about what your book is doing is it's looking, all these conversations we had in the first hour on your show about, the PC movement and all of this infighting on the left and groups accusing each other of lots of different things, is that when you can go after somebody for not using gender terms right, or when you can go after somebody for not understanding some aspect of some small community, we always keep the argument there and don't take it to that the entire fucking thing is fucked up and is creating losers. It's zero sum. You know what I mean? Yeah. This model of scarcity in the work that I do, civilized religions treat spirituality the same way. Christians, Jews, and Muslims, according to them, God is in short supply, and they're the
suppliers.
Yeah, they're the suppliers. Yeah. And don't let it get out that you meet God on a mountaintop yourself. You got to come to us, right? And register in our schools and learn our sacred texts.
We'll burn you at the fucking stake for saying shit like that.
Yeah. And that's been the case forever. But in the Paleolithic, when you're looking at spiritual models that come out of this swath of caves that goes all the way through southern Europe, I've talked about this before with you. The beauty of these things is that this comes from a time before we differentiated as a species, right? So we weren't Jews, Christians, Muslims. We weren't French, Germans, Italians. We weren't Republicans. I mean, sure, people had tribal affiliations, but we were nomadic, and those affiliations were loose, as you've talked about.
Yeah.
And so that cave art is a spiritual set of images that literally is every living human has heritage to.
Right.
And that's why they're so powerful. And so as a religious scholar and a scholar of mythology, I'm looking at the same thing. I'm looking back to the Paleolithic, saying here was the last time we had a set of spiritual iconography and symbols that literally spoke to every living person on the planet. And they are symbols rooted in our connection to the natural world.
Right.
They're not civilization symbols.
Right.
They're animal symbols. They're totemistic symbols.
Yeah. Yeah, and the civilizational symbols that we reify and worship are, the pyramids and statues to Grant.
Yeah, they're hierarchical.
They're hierarchical, both in design and in. I'm just looking up a quote from Thoreau, a fantastic quote from Thoreau. How do you spell Thoreau? Thoreau, right? Thoreau says, "To the sick, indeed, nature is sick, but to the well, it's a fountain of health."
Wow. Looking for another thing he wrote about.
Yeah, about the pyramids. I'm sorry, you'll have to.
Well, while you're looking that up, that's fine. I'll say this to that while you're looking for that quote. The spiritual texts that we draw our spiritual tradition from, our religious tradition from, the Hebrew Bible, right, which is where Judaism, Christianity, and Islam come from, right, presents the natural world as a wasteland, right? We live in the fallen, barren land, and hopefully one day we'll be able to return to a heavenly paradise. And if you lived in Babylon, if you lived in the Fertile Crescent when it was no longer fertile, right? Because do you talk about progress traps in your book?
Oh, yeah. I use Ronald Wright's book a lot, A Short History of Progress. That's an amazing book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when that land became barren, and as far as the eye could see was unusable land and total, right, and people struggled. Yeah, your view of nature is that it's harsh and unforgiving and barren, but that's not the world that many indigenous people inhabit, right? And
no, not at all.
And tell them this land is a barren wasteland, and they're looking around with mangoes and shit falling off the tree.
Exactly.
And they're like, what are you talking about?
Are you kidding me? Yeah. Well, now
it wasn't until you burned it all down and put a fucking Sears there. You know
exactly.
What I mean? Now it is for sure.
Well, that's the thing. We create the condition that we then claim credit for partially saving you from.
Right.
That's the civilizational trick, right? Like we come in, still doing it today, right? We come into whatever, Guatemala. You've been living here for generations. Sorry, now this is owned by the United Fruit Company. You got to leave. Yeah. So we get the army to push you off this land. Fuck you Indians. Now you're starving. You got nothing to do. Well, you can come work for the United Fruit Company, picking bananas.
Yeah.
We'll pay you miserable wages in our own private currency that you can only use in our stores, where we jack up the prices to sell you bags of fucking potato chips and Fruit Loops. And then you can thank us.
And then suddenly there's diabetes.
And thank us for giving you a job. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I can't find the quote, but I'm talking about the pyramids. And it's like, okay, so what are the pyramids? Are the pyramids one of the great wonders of the world? Or are the pyramids an image of insane, delusional ambition, power, domination over 30,000 slaves working for 10 years to build that shit?
When you read about that, and you read that these pharaohs, the minute they took power, they started working on their own tombs. They were completely fucking obsessed with their own deaths,
right?
And they would fucking kill nothing to help the rest of the people. It was just kill and maim whoever you have to prepare this tomb
exactly
for your own death.
So Thoreau says something like, "As to the pyramids, there's nothing so much at them as to wonder how some ambitious boobies could," he uses that term, ambitious boobies.
Ambitious boobies are my favorite kind, my friend.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that civilization, I sort of go through this in the book, like, is it a cancer? Like, so I look at how it's similar to a disease model or a mutant cell that, and I look at it as a pyramid scheme, because it's very much like the center. The wealth gets pulled from the outside to support the center, which is more and more corrupt and wasteful. And
there's always this promise that on the next horizon.
Right, and it's always expanding because you need more and more to feed the center, and then eventually it collapses, which is Ronald Wright's argument in Short History of Progress. But then I end up coming down with this argument that I think civilization is a superorganism and that we are contained within it, the way that geese are contained within a flock or salmon in a school. And I go through Kevin Kelly. I don't know if you know his work. He's a Silicon Valley, like he's one of the guys who invented the internet and one of these super geniuses. And he talks a lot about systems and self-replicating systems and all that. And so I look at that. And the other thing I was looking at is, I didn't know this until I researched this. Do you know that all locusts were grasshoppers?
No.
It's the same species. But what happens is you get a certain number of grasshoppers, you get a certain population density, and they become locusts. Whoa. Their shape of their head changes, the coloring changes, their legs get longer, their abdomen changes, and their behavior changes.
And then they fucking decimate.
And they go out and wipe out everything. Yeah. So the way it works is not all grasshoppers become locusts, but all locusts were grasshoppers.
Wow.
And there's one particular species in North Africa, in the Sahara. And what happens is the rains come, so there's plenty of food. So the grasshoppers replicate. And there are lots of grasshoppers they're eating. But then the rains stop. And then the fertile areas, the oases and all that, start to shrink, right? And as they're shrinking, the grasshoppers are getting more packed together.
Okay.
And then they reach a certain density where they flip and turn into locusts, and then they take off and start wiping out everything.
Oh, shit.
Right. So
you think we've hit that?
I think that's what civilization is. I think it's not that
Starlings are very similar kinds of creatures.
Right. Yeah. They
decimate things in the same way.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, when the food runs out, most of them die, and the ones who are left turn back into grasshoppers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think that to me is the best image for what civilization is. It's that it's not that foragers are noble savages or they're better than, they're the same as us. We're the same species. The difference is that when you pack us together and these emergent intelligences arise, institutions, and they want to continue, they want to flourish and survive, and their agendas and their interests supersede our interests as individuals, and so then they inoculate us.
And they're interested in self-perpetuation.
Of course, and just like with the pharaohs, they don't give a shit about us, right? They're interested in their survival, and so they inculcate in us beliefs and behaviors that are actually destructive and detrimental and toxic to us as organisms, but it doesn't matter. Like our diet, like we're eating shit that no human being should be eating,
right?
But we're told, every day, if you watch television, you're told this stuff's great. This will make you happy. This
aisle after aisle of poison.
Yeah. Right. So I think that's what's going on, and that's how I try to mitigate the anger of it, because it's not that we're bad people. So when I said we're the Nazis, I don't mean like we individually are nasty, horrible people. What I mean is that we're in a system that creates this. And one of the most moving examples of what I think how powerful this is looking at what happens in disasters. There's this great book called A Paradise Built in Hell by Rebecca Solnit.
Yeah.
And she looks at what actually happens in floods, earthquakes, war zones, all these terrible things that we're constantly trying to avoid.
Yeah.
What happens when this overriding Hobbesian state that's supposed to keep us from tearing each other apart, what happens when it's stripped away?
Yeah.
People take care of each other. People take care of strangers. People remember those days as the happiest days of their lives.
Right. And
in fact, she quotes this guy who's like the godfather. I can't remember his name, but he was like the guy who started disaster studies, and and he says after 40 years of doing this research, he's come to the conclusion that daily life is the disaster.
Wow.
Because daily life is when people are living in isolation and sadness, and they can't cope, and they're ready to kill themselves. Nobody kills themselves in a fucking disaster, because there's meaning.
Yeah, that's true.
There's meaning.
Shared purpose.
There's shared purpose. I mean, people still talk about after 9/11 in New York, it was the best time ever in Manhattan. People would smile at each other on the street. People were going out of their way to help one another. Not people they knew, not this this family genetic bullshit that you hear from Steven Pinker and people like that. Like, oh, we're only
wired to look out for.
Like my cousin, I'll be as kind to two cousins as I would be to one brother. And it's like, give me a fucking break, dude.
It's pretty messed up, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned something a second ago, and we can maybe wrap it up here in a second. This has been great. I normally take breaks on this show, but I decided on this episode just to fuck the format. My producer's going to kill me.
Fuck the format.
He wants us to have breaks every 15 minutes. But
15 minutes?
15
you have a
minutes.
producer.
I got a producer. He's on
How
my
do you get a
ass.
producer?
15 to 18 minutes. I got it.
You
like
got
that.
200 listeners and a producer. I got 50,000 listeners and I'm answering my own fucking email. Man, what is up with that?
I got a social media person.
I'm doing something wrong.
I got 2 assistant producers.
I thought you were going to say your wife was your producer, but then you said he. I'm like, he? You actually have an
actual guy.
Are you paying him?
Right. But I want to ask you. You talked about system. I kind of pay him. Yeah, I pay him in weed and other things. But yeah, and blowjobs.
Weed and blowjobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not from me, but
all right.
Well, the weed is not from me. Is what I'm saying. You talked
But
about
the blowjobs.
The blowjobs. I can't outsource that. I can't trust people to get my gold standard.
Hey, maybe you'll get an AVN award someday.
But mine's going to be for the sex scene, for fuck's sake. I'll take on Dick
Tribbles.
Dick Tribbles or whatever it was, and the Hedgehog, man. You know Ron Jeremy met your mom.
I introduced Ron Jeremy to my mom.
And how are they doing together?
They're very happy. They're very happy. My mom has no idea who Ron Jeremy is.
Still.
Well, I didn't tell her.
You just said, "Oh, this is Ron."
Well, yeah, there was this. I mean, I should explain this, but Dan Savage and I have become friends, and he was shooting a pilot for HBO, and he asked me to come down and participate in it. And afterwards, there was a studio audience, and afterwards we were all sort of milling about. And my mother came in, and my sister and some friends or whatever. And it was fun for them to get to see me on TV and you know whatever. And Ron Jeremy was there, and he was with a woman who I've had on the podcast, this wonderful woman who lives in L.A., who's just hilarious and knows, one of those people who knows everyone, you know, and she knows Ron Jeremy. And so she introduced me, and so I'm talking to him, and then my mother comes over, and it was one of those awkward moments where you're talking to someone and then your mother walks in. So you have to introduce them. And I'm like, Mom, this is Ron Jeremy. Like, oh, hello, Mr. Jeremy.
Mr. Jeremy, yeah. don't shake his hand, Mom. Don't shake his hand. That's amazing. How'd that go? All right.
Yeah.
I had a thing recently. I wanted to tell you this, and I want to get back to the systems theory thing, but I got a call from this woman who said she ran a casting company in New York, and she wanted to talk to me about a project. And I immediately thought I was being catfished, or the next thing, that I was being fucked with by a friend, or that the next thing was going to be, we love your headshot, just send us $5,000 and we're going to get, you know what I mean? And so I went, I don't know, right? So I looked up the agency, and they seem legit. Which means they had a LinkedIn page. So that seems legit to me. Fuck it. And I just tried to see if I could find any dirt on it, and couldn't, and saw some projects they had worked on. And so I called the lady back, and then she wanted to do a Skype interview with me she said National Geographic has a show that they're working on about mythologies, and they're going to go to different places around the world where the place is rooted in some mythology, and kind of do a show from that place about that mythology. And your name came up as a possible host for the show. And I said, how did my name? I said, thank you, I'll talk to you, but how? And she goes, I just found you on Twitter. She was real non-committal about how.
Are you on Twitter?
My name. I'm on Twitter, but there's nothing there that would say I could host a show like this. You know what I mean? And I said, I feel totally qualified to host this show, but I don't know how you would get that from my Twitter account. But I didn't push it. I didn't want to get into it. So I did the interview with her, and I don't think I got the job. It was like over a month ago, and I haven't heard anything. But it was a Skype interview. And it was the strangest fucking interview I ever did, because the lady, she was super New York, right? So she was, she had all these questions, and she would be like, so why should I give a shit about mythology? So like Robin Hood, tell me why I should care about Robin Hood. And that would be the question, and I would go, okay.
First of all,
I'm not sure you should.
Are you rich or poor?
Yeah. So I came up with some bullshit. I don't know. I think I heard on Stern that nobody with facial hair gets on TV, because that's why Letterman and those guys all grow the beards, and John Stewart,
really?
as soon as they get off TV, they grow those fucking big beards. So I shaved my goatee before the interview. I did all the stupid shit. Yeah, I waxed just in case you wanted to look down under, see what I was rocking. Anyway, systems theory. We got to talk about that before we go. You brought that up a second ago with this guy you talked to. I've been really into this lately. When I talked to Stephen Schwartz, we talked about this, and from my understanding of it, and for the audience, systems operate according to a couple of basic rules. And you don't need an organizer, you don't need a god, you don't need a leader. And when you look at how grains of sand organize into dunes, or starlings, or right, all these other things in nature that seem to operate according to some kind of organizational pattern, people that study systems theory go, how does that come to be? And what they've determined is that almost always it's a couple of simple rules that, as long as everything is following that rule, so as grains of sand all respond the same way to wind and friction and time and gravity, and so then since that's the case, they'll form dunes on their own.
Right.
Now, there's more complex systems than a sand dune, right? So a human society is a more complex system than a sand dune. So we have what's called dynamic order, which is always existing on what they call the edge of chaos. And that doesn't mean we're about to descend into, brutality and but that the system is fluid and it creates a dynamic order. When you pour milk into a coffee and stir it, but eventually a uniformity emerges, right? And it's the same principle, handful of simple rules followed by every organism in the shoal of fish or in the thing of starlings. And what I think was going on in the beginning of civilization is that people were recognizing that we were leaving a certain state of existence that we had been in for well over 1 million years, right? At that point.
Depends what you mean by we.
Yeah, that's true, right?
I mean, anatomically modern humans emerged about 200,000 years ago.
But 175,200 in what, Rift Valley, right? Is that?
Yeah, in Central Africa.
Okay.
Yeah, but earlier human forms existed before that, and they were foragers.
Yeah.
So you could argue that several million years. I mean, chimpanzees are foragers.
Right.
And we split from them probably 3 to 5 million years ago. So
it depends on how you.
It defines what you mean by we.
But I think that these early religious impulses that saw this move into civilization kind of saw what was happening and warned against it, and were saying, okay, when you go over into this new thing, make sure you don't, kill each other and steal from each other and take each other's wives, right? Because you're going to devour each other if you're moving into this new set of associations and relationships, and there's nothing coded in you genetically to prepare you for that. It's a foreign place, and so we have to set some rules up that everybody has to follow, or it's not going to work. And I talked to Stephen Schwartz about this, and he talks about the golden rule, and he says his calculation is to do nothing that isn't compassionate and life-affirming. That's a simple rule that he follows, that anything he wants to do, right, is it a compassionate and life-affirming choice? And if it is, then he can go forward on deciding if he wants to go through it. And if it's not, then it's a non-starter. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to think about, because I thought that's a very simple rule that everybody could follow. That's something that everybody could understand. And if everybody did that, imagine the businesses that wouldn't exist. Imagine the food products that wouldn't exist. Imagine the television shows that wouldn't, so much of the output of what's in our society wouldn't be there. Yeah. Because it couldn't be there, because the person producing it would know this isn't a compassionate and life-affirming choice, and so it couldn't be done.
Yeah,
it's a simple rule that would guide the.
Yeah, the problem is that they get you in it gets you in spots where it splits your allegiances, because let's say you've got a wife and kids to take care of, and you're the only breadwinner, your wife's ill, and you whatever, you need to make the money.
Yeah.
You have a job that's producing shitty food.
Yeah.
But it pays the bills. It keeps your kids in school. It gives them food on the table. So is it life-affirming for you to quit that job?
Yeah.
Whose life are we talking about affirming here?
That's a Breaking Bad, right? You got a guy who's got to start making meth in order to take care of his family and pay his medical bills, right?
Yeah, and so I think that's the problem. You get you often hear like these millionaires, or their friends love them, they're great people, but meanwhile their business is based on dumping shit in the river,
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah,
they gave a lot to a kids charity.
Yeah, and they're generous with their social circle and their friends, and so that's why I think it always comes down to a question of scale.
Yeah,
if you're living, you're going to be nice to people who know you,
right?
Because if they start talking shit about you, it's going to fuck up your life. Right. So you care about what people think about you. But when you're in a position because of scale where you are affecting the lives of people that you don't know and never will know, then it's like, operating a fucking drone over Afghanistan.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's like a drone attack.
Yeah. So it's like whatever. Hey, if it's the wrong car, what do I care, man?
Doesn't even look real. It's like you're playing an Xbox or something.
Exactly. So there's this normalization of evil that's part of the civilizational process, I think, that's really fucked up. And like in terms of mythology, what you were talking about, where, hey, we're moving from one system into another. I mean, to me, that's, talking about mythology, that's the Old Testament everywhere, moving from the Garden of Eden. What was the Garden of Eden? It was a hunter-gatherer life. It was the life of foragers, right? Where people were naked, they were happy, they were innocent, there was no problem. Then they ate from the tree of knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of how to control the source of food rather than just find the food. Yeah.
Like Louis C.K. talks about it when he goes, he talks about this too. It's funny, we keep bringing him up, but have you heard that bit when he says, we've created these jobs and all of this artifice around, getting food for ourselves and getting water, and he goes, if I were God, I would go, I fucking left you food. It's all over the ground. Just pick it up and eat something. And then Louis goes, yeah, but it doesn't have bacon on it. I want to wrap, I got to wrap it in bacon, right? You know what I mean? And if I want to wrap everything in bacon, I got to have civilization, right?
Yeah. And where's that bacon come from? Talk about the normalization of evil, right? The industrial farming.
That's probably the best example.
Yeah. And yet, and then, but it shows the neurosis of civilization because we're freaked out by, whatever, roadkill,
right?
Or, we're in tears for weeks when our dog gets old and dies.
Or when that guy kills that lion.
Cecil the lion,
And want to kill that dentist.
Fine, kill a lion. Just don't kill one with a name,
Yeah, that was the problem. Yeah, if he had just waited and killed one over here.
Kill that other one, the one that no one named
Cecil.
yet. It's so fucking ridiculous.
Right.
But meanwhile, like you say, bacon-flavored ice cream. Isn't that funny?
Right.
Anyway, to your Stephen Schwartz, what he said, it reminds me of, one of the simplest sort of instructions is love and do as you please. I often think of that one.
Wasn't that Crowley who said that too?
I think it was St. Augustine.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Who was actually kind of a dick.
Yeah.
But he
wrote a big piece of propaganda for Roman civilization called City of God. But he had some good ideas.
Yeah. Well, and he was the guy who said, "Lord, give me chastity, just not yet."
Yeah, he was a player. He was keeping his pants.
Well, and he was a player, and he was. I mean, I'm no expert on Saint Augustine or Augustine. I don't know, but he. Like, apparently,
more about him than Baroque music. I do. But I do. But go ahead. But anyway.
But he had a long affair with a slave who he loved. But he left her and went and married someone from his own class, and she was basically like left to die.
The slave.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's
that's something I didn't know.
There's a chilling story of a skeleton that was found and buried in North Africa, and it was the skeleton of a woman. And in the burial, she was wearing a collar, and it said, it was like a collar that couldn't be removed. It was locked, and it said "property of," and it gave some Roman's name.
Oh, no shit!
So she had escaped and died in the desert.
God damn.
Yeah, I mean slavery. Before civilization, there's no slavery. And I wrote about Rome. I mean, I didn't know this. Everything we know about Rome, all the stories of the plays and the people we know of, and those were all from three types of people, like the senators, the equestrians, and something I don't remember.
Yeah.
They constituted less than 0.5% of Roman society.
Yeah.
The rest were mainly slaves.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about them, right? But what do we hear about Rome? Oh, the seat of civilization, and we build our buildings in Washington to mimic the Roman, and then Greece was just as bad.
Yeah.
We completely whitewash history, and our own and current times as well, to make it seem like we're doing something wonderful, while you step back from it and you look, and what are we doing? We're miserable. We're hurting one another, and we're destroying the planet.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
You know, Terence McKenna talked about this back in the early 90s. He said these Greek and Roman models of civilization that we've used since the Enlightenment to restructure the Western world aren't serving us, and so we need to reach further back. And he kind of left it at that, right?
Well, and the thing is, all right, this is another thing I get into the book. So the idea is, okay, the most common idea is it's the 1% is fucking over the rest of us. And I just played into it by talking about how, the top half of 1% of Roman society, blah, 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 right? But here's the real killer. Rich people aren't any happier than the rest of us.
Right.
So that's what got me thinking about superorganisms, that it's not that the rich, it's not a Marxist vision. Yeah. It's not that they're winning and fucking over the rest of us. We're all losing.
Yeah.
We're all losing. So if we're all losing...
Because the richer you are, the more paranoid you are of protecting your
Your DuPont thing that we were talking about earlier, right? The Astors. And, you meet anyone who's got a ton of money, they're lonely, they're paranoid, they're freaked out.
Overcharging them. And part of them knows, when I talked to Stephen Schwartz, I asked him about this because he comes from this kind of legacy family in Virginia. His family's been in Virginia since 1609. He wears Walter Raleigh's signet ring around. Schwartz does, right? And he's a down-to-earth guy, and he's a lovely man, and he's brilliant, and he's very progressive in his thinking. But he comes from this kind of royalty in Virginia, and huge estate back there. If you
he's
can
a
imagine.
Traitor to his class.
Yeah, right. And I asked him, and he said, the thing is that all of his brothers and sisters, they went into a doctor, a pediatrician. One does civil service, and one's a lawyer, but fights on behalf of immigrant farmers and stuff. And I said, it sounds like a lot of white guilt. And he goes, yeah, it kind of was. He goes, there was this understanding in my family that all of our money was ill-gotten. It came on the backs of Indians and blacks and Chinese. And no one talked about that. No one said that, but everyone kind of knew it, right? And so our family had there's this dark kind of guilt that, we had a lot of money, but we only got a lot of money because it was stolen from a lot of people. And so what can we do to kind of outlive that karma, and let's go live a life of, civic service or something. But it was the same kind of thing. He was this dark cloud over his family. They got this beautiful estate in Virginia, but no one enjoys it. They sit in it like a prison. Because it's fruit from a poisonous tree, right? It's the same thing, man.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I think this has been good.
So anyone who's listened to this has no reason whatsoever to go out and buy the book, because you've just heard everything that's in it.
Well, when's it coming out? Before we get off, when are we done?
I haven't set a date yet with the publisher, but probably September, October.
2016?
Yeah.
When are you done writing, you think?
I'm doing the big, first big pass-through edit right now. And then once that's done, next week, I'll send it off to the publisher, and then we'll see what they say.
When the last time we talked, when I was on your show last, you were just starting writing. You were like, "Fuck, I got to start writing this book." And so, how does that feel, man? I mean, that's a huge accomplishment.
Exhausting.
On this side of it, yeah. No enjoyment yet, just exhaustion at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, exhaustion. We're also moving in 2 weeks, and so there's a million things I'm thinking about and stressed about. So I think I'll enjoy it, when it. You know how writing is, man. You enjoy it in retrospect. Yeah. It's like giving birth. You're not like, oh, this feels great.
It'll come out and you'll be like, oh yeah, that thing. Right.
Yeah. But you look back on it, and like I said about Sex at Dawn, if it makes life easier and make a little more sense for some people, then that's
That's all I can hope for.
I think about work a lot, and it's like I'm so lucky because most work is like what we were saying before about, life affirming, whose life, right? Most work is indirectly satisfying. You do some bullshit so that you can get money with which you can do something that matters.
Yeah.
Like take care of your family or travel or read or, whatever, listen to music, whatever. And you're so lucky if you have work, as you and I both do, that is directly meaningful.
Yeah.
The work itself is meaningful.
Right.
That's such a luxury,
Sure.
And it's like, okay, I know it doesn't pay well, yours or mine, and it's a pain in the ass and all that. But I always try to remember how lucky you are if you do work that you don't have to translate it into something else to get the meaning.
I mean,
even you look at great athletes. You know, like, oh, you're an amazing basketball player and you make $5 million a year, but you're really just running up and down a floor bouncing a ball.
I've thought about that
you know?
before. Yeah,
it's like you think you're cool, but dude, you know, a teacher is doing something meaningful.
I thought about that before. I was talking to a friend the other day. I said, what would it be like to be like, you know, the bass player in Journey or something? To have like your life, like that's what you are. That's the only thing you are. And you've toured the world and you got lots of money and you fucked lots of people. But at the end of the day, you're a bass player for Journey. Like have you done something meaningful in the world? I'm not saying, I mean, to all of our Journey fans out there, you know what I mean? I don't want to
more than
I'm going to be getting these letters now.
Boston,
you know, how dare you, sir? You know, pick on Foreigner if you must, right? But leave fucking Journey alone. But
Sticks.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? To do something like that. I mean, because if you're going to be in Journey, you might as well be like any rock band. If you're not the singer or the lead guitar player, you're a douchebag.
I remember my buddy. I think it was in the earlier episode, and we were talking about classical music, and I told you about my friend who's this musical genius, right? And
yeah, you blew. Sorry, people have to go back and listen to that. Anyway,
so in high school, you know, I have no musical ability whatsoever, but I hear it really deeply. I love music, right? And he's so talented, and I got really pissed at him in high school when he applied to engineering school at Cornell. And I'm like, dude, are you fucking kidding me? You could be that guy. You could be, you know. And I remember having this real heart-to-heart talk with him, and he's very humble. He, you know, it took a lot to get him to even acknowledge that he was super talented. But finally, he said to me, you know, he said, look, here's the truth. If I worked really hard and was really lucky, I could be Sting's bass player.
Yeah.
You know, that's it.
Exactly.
That's what I'm looking at.
Wow.
And like, yeah, I could probably do that, but I'd be Sting's bass player. And Sting plays bass, you know, so you're really fucked.
Right. Exactly.
So you're his backup bass player.
Right. I thought about that when, you know, I went to see King Crimson when they came through town a while back, and it's, you know, it's Robert Fripp, it's Adrian Belew, it's. God, I don't think they had Gavin Harrison playing drums yet. Whoever they had on that Mastelano guy, and Tony Levin, the bass player, and you know, and I saw him at the Roseland Theater downtown in Portland. Holds about 600 people. Right? And I thought, and you can walk right up to Tony Levin, and this is probably the best bass player on the planet, at least that people know of, right? And he's playing the Roseland Theater. Now, when he goes out with Peter Gabriel, he
Victor
plays
Wooten, man.
Yeah, all right. Now you're getting big. I mean, at least Levin's in the discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
And these guys, so these are the guys that have made it.
Yeah.
And he's schlepping around in a van playing an 800-seat arena in Portland. Probably make $2,000, you know, from if he's lucky for the evening, right? And whereas Britney Spears is going to sell out, or maybe not Britney Spears, but you know.
Yeah, although I mean, musicians, that's a tough example because I do feel like there's something directly meaningful in playing music, and it's an amazing thing. Music's just so fucking mysterious to me.
No, I think so too. I think it's wonderful.
It's
I just think we
shamanic.
have a society that doesn't honor people that do it well necessarily. I mean, sure, the rock star, but most, you know, this happens in Portland all the time. There'll be some local act or some blues act or some, you know, singer-songwriter who's been in town for 30 years and has done meaningful work and who's a part of the community, and then they get cancer and they don't have fucking health care because they've been a musician, so they don't have a regular job, and so then they have to do some benefit to pay for the, you know what I mean? It's a mess. No, I think it's meaningful work. I just don't think it's treated as such.
Well, it's interesting, you know, look at the things that are paid the most. You could almost, I may be talking out of my ass here, but it seems the things that are paid the most highly are the things that are the most toxic.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we're talking about entertainers, athletes, whatever. Their job is to distract us.
Right.
But who's making the real money? Wall Street guys, hedge fund, you know. What's that like to work at a hedge fund? It's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
You're so removed from anything that's got juice. You're so far from the sunlight. You're so far from beauty or kindness or compassion, or, you know, it's just you're working in a fucking vault, you know. you're better off being a goddamn coal miner, 2 miles underground.
And according to your book too, I'll say this before we get off here.
You're gonna get letters from hedge fund managers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all kinds of letters come. Black lesbians, hedge fund managers, they all we got no chance, right?
We've offended everyone at this point. And the fucking circus clowns.
Yeah,
God
those guys
damn it, they're not funny.
Yeah. Librarians too could fuck themselves, I'll tell you. I don't trust them.
Hey, I got a thing for librarians.
You got a thing for librarians. There's a couple of hot ones at my school.
Black lesbian librarians.
Yeah. Jesus. But these entertainers, right? I was thinking about this because I watch a lot of TV. I watch, I'm into, the new Fargo.
Fargo's great.
And, I'm watching all kinds of shit, and I love it. But then I also go, God, so much fucking effort is put into this content, and it's all done to distract me and other people, right? We spend so much time, money, and effort distracting ourselves, and if we were living a life of meaning, we wouldn't need to be distracted so much. We're distracting ourselves from a life of frustration and purposelessness. You know what I mean? And so this, speaks to your book. A happy person sitting on the beach doesn't need to be removed from that environment.
Right. And what is the biggest drug problem in America right now? It's fucking addiction to painkillers. Yeah. Well, let's talk about where all the pain's coming from. Yeah. What pain is this? That people are smoking fucking meth until their eyes fall out.
Yeah.
Well, that's not because meth is so great. It's because their other options are so bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's completely true.
And we call this progress. Welcome to modernity. Yeah.
But at least I get to do a podcast. That's one benefit of this modern era.
Well, honestly, I'm there's a book. It's right over there somewhere. It's called Future Perfect.
Yeah.
And it's one of those books that you were referring to where people are saying, no, there's a possibility we're going to solve all this and technology is great. And it's by Stephen Johnson. I talked to Rogan about it. You might have heard me talking about it. And it's actually, I got it as one of the books that I was going to trash. There's a section in the book where I'm like, okay, I got to respond to other arguments that disagree with me. So I look at The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, whom I call the rational opportunist, and some other critiques. Steven Pinker, the latest book about how everything's wonderful and getting better. And, so I looked at this book, Future Perfect, thinking I'm going to just pick it apart, and in the end, he actually convinced me. He's got some really strong arguments, and his main thing, he talks about peer progressive networks, which are networks of like-minded people that can get together on the internet and aren't restricted by living in the same place. Yeah. So until very recently, you had to be in a city and find each other and get together on Wednesday nights.
Conference,
and
the academic paper.
Right. Now you can be in fucking Mongolia and wherever you are, and you can set up these networks, and they come together organically, and they're incredibly powerful. And we're just at the beginning of this era, and we haven't even begun to see the effects they're going to have, right? And so if you take this same kind of thinking and technology that we're using with podcasts and Kickstarter, and one of the examples he shows is 2 years after launching, Kickstarter was already directing more funding into supporting the arts than the National Endowment of the Arts of the United States.
That's
right?
Amazing.
Hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's people saying, yeah, I'll give $20 to this guy who's making this film. Why not? That looks like a good film, right? Nothing coming back. No, like there's bonus bullshit, whatever. But whatever.
DVD,
It's just this organizational technology that allows people to leverage decent kind impulses, and impulses that can actually make the world a better place. So if we can apply that to voting, imagine that. Imagine what'll happen if we could actually replace this outdated, silly bullshit voting system we have, electoral college crap and gerrymandered districts, with direct voting. And even like, okay, you can vote, and 50% of your taxes you can direct to different programs that you support. Okay,
so
50%
what isn't chosen then doesn't get funded. So if no one picks military spending,
where's it go? Yeah,
you can't fucking fund it.
Right. So you need to convince us that we really need to be spending money on this F-32.
I would love something like that. Yeah. And we've talked about it, but I think podcasting it's kind of a guerrilla radio format too.
Yeah.
It's a wide open area for people to talk to one another directly around the world.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you about this before we get out of here. Guys like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, they're all warning
AI.
Yeah, they're all warning of this big AI thing that's coming within the next 10 years, and they talk about it in like a real bad way. They go, something's about to happen.
Apocalyptic.
Yeah. And do you know about the IBM Watson?
The computer that plays
AI?
the chess?
No, this is a different one. This is their AI machine that they've built. It's called Watson, right? And they've had several things where they have people come talk to it, and it has to pass the Turing test, right? To where if you have a conversation with it and it's responding, and you get the feeling that it's a real person. Yeah. And so there's a great video on YouTube of this, right? Well, the first problem they had is it started cursing because it was accessing the Urban Dictionary. So it was like, hey, fuck you. Man, it was talking about reach arounds
What's
and
in
shit.
New York? Come on.
Yeah. So they had to like had to scrub that from all of it, right? So it was like, yo, bitch, right? Which is amazing. But then they have a reporter talking to it, right? And the reporter says, a lot of people are afraid of you. And the thing says, why would somebody be afraid of me? And he said, well, people don't really know where this is going and what your technology is, and they feel that if you get to a certain level of sophistication, it'll make people obsolete. And then Watson goes, no, that's not the case at all. We have a place for humans. We're going to keep you all in human zoos. This is what the AI said, right? And so then the programmers are like, the interview over, and they play, right? And the reporter freaked the fuck out.
Really?
Now, probably that algorithm was just pulling sci-fi stories that are, you know what I mean? There's probably some totally rational explanation for it, but it was a really creepy moment. And what those guys are arguing is that right now a computer, these machines that we build, they can only be as complex as a human mind can fathom. And so we come up with something and then tell an engineer to go make it do that thing, right? But once the thing is self-aware, it will be able to improve itself, the idea. And then it will be able to do that in exponential speed. And we don't know what direction that improvement will go. And so what do you think about stuff like that in terms of...
Yeah, I think it's a real problem.
It's not just like, it's going to automate your job at the factory, and then Dad won't have a job there anymore. We've already gone through one wave of that, but these guys are talking about, and they're not conspiracy theorists. This isn't Alex Jones, right? I mean, this is Bill Gates and Elon
People
Musk
who know,
and Stephen Hawking.
No,
sign of technology getting away from us. Rushcraft talks about it in Future Shock. He's like, we're inventing things faster than we can understand.
We're inventing things that can invent things. That's the quantum leap in all this. As you say. So, I think it's a major issue. But as you say, I think the real issue is that people are already obsolete. They're obsolete from from manufacturing. Mm-hmm. They're going to be obsolete from even like driving trucks and delivering shit soon, right? So we're on this track of automation of things that people used to do, and yet we're still stuck in this idea that you got to work for your money, and if you can't get a job, well, too bad for you.
40 hours too.
Well, the jobs are all gone, like there's no way to make a living. So what happens? So you get, hundreds of millions of disaffected, angry young men in the world. Yeah. And we see where that's getting us, right? So they join cults, they join armies, they, all sorts of bad shit happens. And then, on another realm, but the same sort of conversation with miniaturization of weaponry, they've got these drones now that are the size of mosquitoes that have a little camera and a microphone. So there could be a drone in this room right now. We don't even know it's here, right?
NSA.
Well, the NSA, but also Chinese hackers and ISIS and
ex-girlfriends, all kinds of shit.
Your mother's like, what do you have to
3D print guns too now? Which is fucking crazy too. I mean, the 3D printing revolution is another one that holds all of this potential, because you can put one of these machines in like a little field hospital in the middle of Bangladesh, and you can make like a heart valve for a child or something. Right? So that's
always how they sell it to you. Like, oh, this is going to make life amazing. We invented flight, and within 5 years we were dropping bombs on people. So you're still selling us technology that's going to save us. When has it ever saved us?
That's true.
Like as I say in the book, like my dad has a heart transplant. My dad's alive because of amazing medical technology, and that's great. But what did this cost? I'm not talking about the procedure. I'm saying these things can only exist in a world that allows them to exist, and that world includes decades of slavery and all this disease and wars, and it's like it's a complete package.
How old your dad?
77 now, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, he got it 10 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe his heart wouldn't have been as stressed if he had been living in a different kind of world as well. You know what I mean? A healthier.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's...
It goes back to your thing, you know what I mean?
Or he wouldn't have drank as much alcohol that fucked up his liver, or, who knows. There are all sorts of circular arguments with that stuff. But what I wonder about, the point I was getting to, is miniaturization of weaponry.
Yeah.
How are these systems going to stay in place? How are they going to defend these huge discrepancies of wealth and opportunity when you can pack a nuclear bomb into a small backpack and take a speedboat and ride it right up to Wall Street?
Yeah.
How are you going to defend this shit? My fantasy is that we get to a point pretty soon where it's indefensible, physically indefensible, and the only way to survive as a species is to return to fierce egalitarianism.
Yeah.
The only way to survive, because, see, this is the key in hunter-gatherer societies. People like Steven Pinker and Richard Dawkins argue that, if there was one person who was trying to take advantage of the others, an interloper, a lazy person, whatever, then they would reproduce more, and the others would get taken advantage of and reproduce less, and so the selfish gene will always win out.
Yeah.
Right? That's the basis of the selfish gene,
right.
and a lot of evolutionary psychology and these arguments about how altruism is genetic based. You only take care of your close kin and all this stuff, right?
Yeah, and oxytocin only is in group.
Right. In group, out group. We hate the foreigners and all that. But as you said, the groups were fluid. It's very hard to know who's in group, who's out group, because people come and go, fission, fusion societies and all that.
And the oldest ethic is the hospitality ethic.
Exactly.
Actually. Yeah, it's
right.
The oldest human ethic.
Yeah.
Is to welcome the stranger.
You don't hate the stranger. You invite them into your home.
You give them a bath. You give them a couple of slave girls. You give them something to eat.
Well, you don't have any slave girls. I mean, in those societies, you give them your wife if you're the Eskimos.
Yeah, good point.
Or you let your wife fuck them if she wants to.
Yeah.
But what the hell am I talking about here? What they don't think about is in hunter-gatherer societies, everybody's armed. Everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
So somebody gets uppity and says, fuck you guys, I don't feel like doing anything. You're going to feed me. And by the way, you don't get to have sex. I'm only having sex.
Yeah.
That guy's got an arrow in his back within fucking 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that there's always going to be the selfish interloper. Or they get banished, or they get pushed off an iceberg, or, I mean, there are a lot of ways for accidents to happen in hunter-gatherer societies.
Yeah. Saber-tooth got him. Old Frank,
Yeah, sorry, buddy. Happened again. So anyway, we could go on for hours about this. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man, this was a lot of fun. Maybe we'll do it again in Barcelona.
Yeah. I hope this takes off and you get thousands of people writing you emails asking for advice.
Yeah. Careful what you wish for, kind of thing. Huh? Well, this has been a 2-hour long on the Block Radio episode. Hour 1 is over on Tangentially Speaking. If folks, has it been?
Yeah, it's been 2 hours on this, so it's a 3-hour thing altogether. We've gone Rogan length here.
I was gonna say, well, I'm ready for Rogan.
We've gone Rogan.
We've gone Rogan. That's amazing. Awesome, folks. We'll catch you on the other side.
You've been listening to On the Block with Andrew Gurovich. The show is produced in Portland, Oregon by Michael DiNapoli at MD Productions. Theme music by Cat Power. Closing music by Jonathan Oak. Look us up on the web at ontheblockradio.com, where you can also link to us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to tune in next week for a brand new episode. Previous episodes can be found on our website. Thanks for listening.
Oh, you beautiful kitties. Oh, look at you out there. Creators of art, history, thought. New minds looking at this world and our lives. Beautiful, like a bolt of lightning in your head. keeps trying to tell you to remember that the world is a paper-thin veil over the truth. We've got our fingers in the seams. We've got our ears against the wall, listening, waiting for the voice of creation to speak our names, to call us back from the brink. It's 11:59 and counting. It's apocalypse, children. Apocalypse.
Hello there, I'm George Putnam. I'd like to begin with a fact, a simple yet shocking fact. It is this: a flood tide of filth is engulfing our country in the form of newsstand obscenity and is threatening to pervert an entire generation of our American children. We know that once a person is perverted, it is practically impossible for that person to adjust to normal attitudes in regard to sex. Yet much of this material has been described as an illustrated, detailed course in perversion. Through this material, today's youth can be stimulated to sexual activity for which he has no legitimate outlet. He is even enticed to enter the world of homosexuals, lesbians, sadists, masochists, and other sex deviants. They constantly portray abnormal sexual behavior as being normal. They glorify unnatural sex acts. They tell youngsters that it's smart, it's thrilling, it provides kicks to be a homosexual, a sadist, and every other kind of deviant. Well, at this point, my friends, I wish to make it clear that the obscenity I'm talking about and the examples that I'm about to show you were not bought on the sly from under the counter. They were not purchased on Skid Row or on the other side of the tracks. They can be bought openly by anyone in drugstores, groceries, delicatessens, terminals, malt shops, cigar stores, newsstands, all over the community. They can be purchased by children. It approaches another class of magazines dealing with transvestites, wherein the wearing of female garments is that which provides sex gratification for the participant. And it is important to realize that even if you knew that your own children would never, under any conditions, buy or read this material, if you knew this, and you can't know this, you must realize that they are constantly exposed to those who do read this material and who might be triggered into compulsive acts of sex violence. This same type of rot and decay caused 16 of the 19 major civilizations to vanish from the earth. Magnificent Egypt, classical Greece, imperial Rome, all crumbled away, not because of the strength of the aggressor, but because of moral decay from within.